Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a place where the air glows gold even after sunset and the sand hums softly beneath your sandals. You stand on the edge of Timbuktu, somewhere around the 14th century, though time doesn't feel linear here. It feels like it's taking a nap. The horizon flickers with torches, and someone is roasting millet cakes that smell faintly like caramelized dust. You're here for a story about maps, not maps of land, but of stars. The kind of maps that shouldn't exist before telescopes. Yet, somehow, in this city of scholars and traders, they already do. You probably won't survive this journey without losing your sense of direction or your skepticism. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sand crunches under your feet as you walk into the maze of narrow streets. Every wall looks like baked honey. The marketplace is closing down, but a few vendors remain, trading salt for gold, gold for paper, and paper for ideas. One man tells you, in a voice roughened by dust storms, that some of these scholars draw the sky itself. He points to a small courtyard where children trace circles into the sand with sticks. The older ones hum as they draw lines between dots, connecting imaginary stars. You follow the hum to a quiet square where the wind is slower, more respectful. This is where the caravan routes once met, the arteries of the Sahara, that pulsed with trade and stories. You hear words like Andalus, Mecca, Sangai, passing between travelers like secret passwords. And above you, the sky unfolds, deep indigo, thick with stars so close you feel like you could brush the Milky Way with your sleeve. In a small corner, under a cloth canopy, a man sits cross-legged beside a low bronze lamp. His name, he says, is Harun al-Timbuktu. He is a mapmaker of the stars, though he's never seen a telescope. He gestures for you to sit, and you do, sinking into the desert's soft breath. With a stick, he begins to draw circles in the dust. "We read the sky," he murmurs, "like you read a map. Every grain of sand has its twin above." He tells you the Tuareg caravans navigated by a system of celestial grids known only to initiates. The positions of Venus and the Dog Star determined departure days. The traders could sense storms simply by watching the shimmer near the horizon. Modern historians agree that the Mali Empire's trade routes relied heavily on star-based navigation, but the details, those personal, poetic calibrations, are largely lost. Historians still argue whether the early astronomers of Mali learned their methods from Islamic scholars in Cairo, or whether something entirely homegrown was already glittering here in the desert long before. You catch a faint chuckle from Harun. "The scholars up north," he says, "think we copied their stars, but the heavens don't belong to anyone." A small child approaches, balancing a bowl of water that reflects the sky. Harun dips his finger into it, sending ripples across Orion's reflection. "When the water trembles," he says, "so do the heavens." You can't tell if it's metaphor or measurement, but either way, it's beautiful. The night grows cooler. From a distance, a flute begins to play, a tune that sounds like a conversation between constellations. Harun closes his eyes, murmuring coordinates that don't exist on any modern grid. His finger sketches invisible pathways through the stars. And then, just as quietly as he started, he stops. "Tomorrow," he says, "go to the library. There are books that remember what even the stars have forgotten." You look down, and his sand map has already vanished, erased by a passing breeze. All that remains is the faint smell of smoke and salt, and the memory of a man who mapped the night with his hands.
You rise early, though time feels sleepy here. The sky is still pale lavender, and a rooster somewhere is clearly late for his shift. You follow Harun's directions through the winding alleys of Timbuktu until the air itself begins to smell of parchment and sun-baked clay. That's when you see it. The Jinger Rubber Mosque and its adjoining library, built from mud and straw that has outlasted empires. The walls seem to breathe, exhaling dust and secrets. You duck beneath an archway and step into the shade. The library is quieter than a prayer. Shelves lean slightly, like tired old men, but they hold thousands of manuscripts: astronomy, medicine, poetry, law. A young attendant in a blue robe nods politely and hands you a square of parchment so delicate it feels alive. On it, faint ink circles trace the movement of Jupiter, annotated in Arabic and Songhai. The writing is both precise and improvisational, as though the scribe couldn't resist adding a few poetic notes about the wanderers of the dark. You breathe in the scent, old acacia resin mixed with desert air. The ink was made, your guide explains, from soot, date palm oil, and the sap of local trees. It lasts longer than metal, except when the termites get philosophical. You laugh softly. There's a gentleness in the humor of Timbuktu. Like everyone here knows the desert will take back what it wants, so you might as well chuckle before it does. On a low table, several manuscripts lie open. One depicts a circular diagram, concentric rings filled with names of stars and months. It's labeled in Arabic as Falak al-Sarha, the desert sky. Another shows a rectangular grid with tiny dots that correspond uncannily to known constellations. Only these dots are slightly off, rotated. Historians still argue whether that's because of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, or because the cartographers saw the sky from deeper south than most medieval astronomers ever went. Your guide leans in and whispers, "They said our scholars learned from Egypt, but look here." He points to the corner of a page where a note reads, "These stars were observed beyond the bend of the Niger." That means someone was mapping constellations locally, centuries before the telescope's lens was even dreamed of. Outside, you can hear the faint call of traders leading camels past. The rhythmic bells blend with the soft rustle of pages, a kind of syncopated heartbeat. You find yourself imagining how these manuscripts once traveled, tied in cloth, carried on camelback through scorching winds and freezing nights, their wisdom humming quietly through the centuries. There's one particular document that catches your eye. The script is elegant, flowing like wind across dunes. It describes the Song of the Seven Stars, a teaching poem used to help students memorize the visible planets. Every verse begins with, "You watch," as if instructing you personally. You smile. Apparently, even 600 years ago, teachers used gentle second-person narration. You watch Mars as he hides, and you wait until he tires of the chase. Your guide chuckles. They said if Mars appeared near the moon, it meant good trade winds, or, depending on who you asked, bad marriage prospects. You linger at a manuscript showing rough sketches of instruments, astrolabes carved from bone, and one very peculiar contraption resembling a bowl with holes. "For listening to the stars," the guide says with an utterly straight face. You're not sure if he's joking, and he doesn't clarify. Maybe it's better that way. He leads you to a corner where a scholar sits, hunched over a dim flame, copying a text by hand. He hums under his breath, a tune somewhere between prayer and lullaby. You realize that every stroke of his pen is part of a ritual. Writing here isn't just preservation, it's devotion. A breeze slips through the window slits, stirring up motes of dust that catch the sunlight like tiny galaxies. For a moment, the air itself becomes a constellation, and you swear you see the same patterns you noticed last night above the dunes. It's as though the sky and the library are mirrors of one another, one written in ink, the other in fire. Before you leave, your guide presses a small scrap of parchment into your hand. On it is drawn a single curved line dotted with 7 stars. "Keep it safe," he says softly. "It shows the road to where the sky begins." Outside, the sun is now high enough to bleach the color out of everything. You squint, clutching your mysterious scrap, and wonder how many travelers once left this very door chasing the same trail of light across the Sahara. Somewhere, a drum begins to beat, a slow, deliberate rhythm. It sounds like someone charting a course through time itself.
You trudge further into the heart of Timbuktu, carrying the scrap of parchment like a talisman. The streets are quieter now, the midday sun softening the mud-brick walls into honey tones. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays, and the echo feels almost like a punctuation mark in the vast narrative of this city. You arrive at a courtyard where a small group of scholars has gathered. They are the sky cartographers, the ones who translate stars into human hands, feet, and parchment. The lead scholar, a wiry man named Isa, gestures for you to sit on a low stone bench. He begins drawing circles in the sand with a long stick, murmuring as he goes. Each circle represents a celestial sphere, and each dot a planet or star. You lean in, noticing subtle flourishes, a crescent line here, a tiny spiral there. Historians still argue whether these annotations were purely symbolic, mnemonic aids, or early scientific observations that predate European attempts at celestial mapping. Either way, it's mesmerizing. A boy nearby hums a soft tune, marking the passage of stars with each note. The scholars clap rhythmically in time with him, creating an almost imperceptible pattern that corresponds to the rotation of the heavens. You realize this is more than math. It is poetry, ritual, and devotion rolled into one gentle cadence. When you try to draw a line yourself, Isa chuckles. "Be careful," he says. "The stars bite if you rush." You laugh, and the group joins, a soft symphony of sand, sticks, and voice. You watch as Isa pulls out a small astrolabe carved from bone, the edges worn smooth from years of use. He holds it up to the sun and aligns it with a distant minaret. "We do not need telescopes," he says. "The sky will tell us what we need if we only listen." You notice tiny markings etched along its rim, constellations annotated with notes that seem to mix astronomy, history, and personal observation. He taps one spot and whispers, "This is where the ancients slept. The stars remember them still." There's a playful side to all of this. Another scholar, Zainab, is measuring the shadow of a small clay sphere, trying to determine the angle of the sun. She miscalculates and ends up hitting her foot. Instead of scolding her, the others laugh gently, and Zainab bows in mock apology, murmuring that even the sun has a sense of humor. You realize that in Timbuktu, curiosity and amusement coexist naturally, like twin stars in orbit. One of the manuscripts Isa shows you contains what looks like a conventional map of the stars, but interwoven with notes about rivers, trade routes, and local festivals. Our constellations are alive. They tell stories of merchants, warriors, and wanderers. You can almost see the sky moving with these histories, each star a character, each line a narrative thread. A minor debate arises. Two scholars argue over the movement of Mercury, whether it drifts on its own or reflects some hidden motion of the Earth. They speak softly but with fervor, pointing at the same manuscript, tracing lines with their fingers. Historians still argue whether these early African astronomers influenced European models directly or if their knowledge remained local until explorers stumbled upon it centuries later. Regardless, the debate is gentle, a whisper against the broader expanse of the universe. Occasionally, Isa pauses to chant an old poem. You hear lines about the desert wind, the patience of the stars, and a traveler who follows Venus for a lifetime. The verses are almost hypnotic, their rhythm in harmony with your own slow, inhaling breath. You can feel the city settling around you, the hum of scholars, the distant bells, the soft scratching of sand underfoot, as though the universe itself has slowed just enough for you to notice. By afternoon, the light slants sharply through the courtyard, casting long shadows of hands over sand maps. You try to memorize the pattern of lines, the positioning of dots, the subtle curvature of each circle. It's as if the stars themselves have been distilled into these gestures, waiting patiently for you to understand without ever rushing. Zainab hands you a small piece of parchment, scribbled with a simple diagram. "Copy it," she says softly, "but remember, the sky is not a puzzle to be solved, only a companion to be noticed." You nod, understanding instinctively that there's a calm in following these patterns, a slow rhythm that doesn't demand answers. As you leave the courtyard, the sun dips lower, turning every wall into molten gold. Somewhere above, a lone hawk drifts in silence, mirroring the careful arcs of constellations you've traced below. You realize that these cartographers aren't just mapping the sky, they are teaching you how to walk gently through it.
The evening air carries a faint chill as you wander toward a nearby courtyard where scholars have gathered for discussion. The sun has melted into the horizon, leaving a soft pink haze over Timbuktu. Lanterns flicker against mud brick walls, their glow casting long, lazy shadows that mingle with the dust. You notice a small group huddled around a low, circular table, papers and parchments spread in what looks like organized chaos. This is where the great debates happen, the kind that echoes softly through centuries without a single sword being drawn. Isa greets you with a nod and whispers, "Tonight, they argue about cosmic motion. Step carefully. The stars may bite." You chuckle at his familiarity with cosmic humor. Around the table, the discussion is gentle but intense. One scholar argues that the stars remain fixed, that the heavens are a divine painting, each star tethered in place. Another counters that the apparent motion comes from the Earth itself, an idea so new it makes your head spin slightly in the best way. Historians still argue whether these debates influenced European models directly, or whether they remained local curiosities until explorers stumbled upon them centuries later. You settle on a low stool, trying to absorb the rhythm of the discussion. Papers rustle, soft murmurs rise and fall, and someone absent-mindedly brushes a quill over a parchment. Occasionally, a camel outside lets out a low groan, perfectly timed with a laugh from one of the scholars when someone misquotes a verse about the moon's path. You can't help but smile. It feels as though the desert itself participates in these arguments, nudging them along with each wind gust. At one point, a stray camel wanders into the courtyard, drawn by curiosity, or perhaps the scent of ink. It nudges a manuscript, and the scholars respond with gentle laughter instead of panic. Someone quips, "Even camels seek wisdom." You imagine European courts at the same moment, debating serious matters, while Timbuktu's stars, sand, and a rogue camel quietly share the same knowledge. Amid the laughter, you notice the serious side of the debate, the meticulous charts, small astrolabes and diagrams marking star positions with remarkable precision. One scholar, a woman with a threadbare blue robe, measures the angle of a shadow cast by a clay sphere. She corrects her calculations several times, each adjustment noted with care. It's fascinating how playfulness and rigor exist side by side here, as though humor lubricates precision. Isa leans over to you, pointing at a diagram of Venus and Mercury. "See this?" he whispers. "We argue endlessly, but the stars don't care. They simply follow their own rhythm." You realize that's the subtle lesson hidden in every gentle chuckle and careful calculation. The universe is patient, indifferent, and quietly accommodating if you are willing to listen. By late evening, the discussion has settled into a soft lull. Some scholars hum melodies that correspond with the night sky, translating planetary movement into gentle music. You close your eyes for a moment, and the sound of voices, paper, and desert wind merges into a hypnotic hum. The debates,
The camels, the accidental spills of ink, all of it becomes part of the quiet rhythm of the stars. When you rise to leave, a scholar presses a small scrap of paper into your hand, a diagram that captures a fleeting alignment of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. She says, "Keep it. It's our gift, not knowledge to hoard, but a map to carry with your eyes and mind." Outside, the night is vast, the stars trembling softly above you, and you realize that the humor, humility, and debates of these scholars have etched themselves gently into your consciousness.
Night deepens as you wander back through Timbuktu's labyrinthine streets. The air is cooler now, carrying the soft scent of desert jasmine and smoldering clay ovens. The city seems quieter, not empty, but aware. The echoes of your footsteps mingling with the distant hum of scholars still debating beneath lantern light. Somewhere overhead, the stars shimmer like tiny lanterns reflected in an endless black pool. You realize, slowly, that the maps, the debates, the gentle songs, they're all fleeting, whispers caught between sand and sky. You pause near the edge of the city, where dunes begin to rise and the Sahara stretches toward infinity. The memory of Issa, Zainab, and the other scholars lingers like a faint perfume. Their work, once vibrant and alive in sand, parchment, and breath, now survives mostly in fragments, tucked into libraries and whispered legends. The manuscripts, once carried on camels through storms, have been lost to wind, fire, and the quiet indifference of time. And yet, traces remain, scattered across continents. A diagram here, a verse there, the occasional echo of a song that traveled across oceans. You kneel and trace your finger over the sand, imagining the celestial lines they might have drawn, circles connecting dots that map not just planets, but stories. The constellations themselves seem to lean closer, shimmering faintly as if to say, "We remember." Scholars still argue about the origins of these early Malian star maps, whether their techniques came from Egypt, Andalusia, or an entirely local genius. The debate feels endless, but it's comforting in its continuity. Human curiosity, you realize, is a constant companion, more enduring than any single empire or manuscript. In your mind, you revisit the courtyard where a camel nudged a manuscript, where scholars chuckled over the alignment of Venus and Mars. You smile, recalling Zainab's soft admonition that the sky is a companion, not a puzzle. There's a rhythm here, gentle and persistent, like the low thrum of a heart in tune with the universe. You imagine caravans crossing the dunes centuries ago, navigating by stars you can still see, each night a rehearsal of the same dance of planets and imagination. Somewhere far away, European navigators may have copied a faint trace of these ideas, unknowingly honoring the silent genius of Mali's star cartographers. And yet, the core remains intact here, in the night air, in the dust underfoot, and the faint hum of Timbuktu's streets. You close your eyes briefly, listening to the soft hiss of wind against walls, recalling the smell of ink and acacia resin, and the precise yet playful movements of scholars tracing invisible lines across the sand. Even as the city sleeps, the stars continue their patient orbit, indifferent to empires, wars, or forgotten manuscripts. You feel a deep, calm connection to those who came before, mapping a universe larger than themselves, yet leaving room for humor, ritual, and wonder. It's a quiet legacy, carried not on stone or bronze, but on attention, memory, and reverence. As you rise to leave the dunes, the night seems almost tactile, the constellations brushing your shoulder. You realize that even though much has been lost, the wisdom, the artistry, and the gentle humor of Mali's celestial mapmakers persist quietly, waiting for anyone patient enough to notice, to follow the lines, and to find themselves under the same starry rhythm.